JavaScript is a popular programming language that is also known as the language of the web. It is used together with HTML, CSS, Bootstrap to create more powerful web pages and web applications. It can be run directly on the browser, making it easier to work with as compared to other backend languages. There are also many frameworks that rely on JavaScript to add backend capability. To follow along with this video, you will need basic understanding of HTML and CSS. You will also need to install a web browser and also install your favorite text editor. I prefer VS Code. Now let's dive into understanding JavaScript concepts. So if you have worked with other programming languages, you might already have an idea of what data type is and what a variable is, but for the sake of this video, we're just going to explain each of them independently. So a variable is a reserved memory location for storing like our data. So for example, I want to define a number inside my code. So just say variable num1 30. So I've defined that number. So when I use the keyword var, it means I can reinitialize this number whenever I want to. So for example, let me try to console log this out. You can see our number is already outputted here. So let's say I decided to change this num to this value, maybe that one, and then I will put it. Let's see what we get. We get 45 because the variable keyword means you can change, like it's varying. You can change the value whenever you want to. So this method I used here is called variable initialize. You define and initialize at the same time. Contrary, you can just like, let's say, define the variable, then later on come and assign it a value. But it's always easier to initialize and assign a value at the start. So the other keyword that's common when defining JavaScript variables is called the const keyword. So the const keyword is used to define constants. That means they will not change in the entire program. For example, let's say I want to use the pi in math. It's usually the 3.14, something like that, 142. So this constant will not change in the entire code. So what I can do is I will just come here and let's see, let me try to do something like that pi. Let's assume I'm calculating area. So I'll just use that pi. Instead of writing 3.1, I'll use pi times radius. Let us define another variable known as radius. I'll give it the keyword. So the radius will give it, let's say, a value of 7. And then pi times radius times again radius. That's it. So let's run that and see our output. You can see we are getting our radius, our area, sorry. So let's assume I wanted to reassign this pi. And then I would come and say pi is equal to, let's say, something like 31.42. Let's see what that will bring. You can see you already have an error here. So it's telling us you cannot assign to a constant variable. So that's the major difference of those two keywords that are used to define variables in JavaScript. However, in recent times, people have become accustomed. The var keyword has somehow been phased out, and we are now using the let keyword to define our variables in JavaScript. So the other thing that maybe I can handle when it comes to variables is the rules of naming variables. So in JavaScript, variables always work using, you have to define your variables using, like you can't define a variable using a keyword. That's a reserved name for JavaScript. Let's say something that's usually a keyword. I can't think of one right now that's a keyword, but you can't use a reserved word as a name for a variable. Again, you can't start with with the symbols. Your reserved names usually have two, and then you can't have like spaces. You can't start the name with a number. So you can have name one, but you can't have one name like that. That would be wrong. You can't define a variable in that manner. You can already see it's highlighting some errors for us. So basically, those are the major rules that you should follow. And then another one that's not very important is that your variable names should have some meaning in the code. Like try to use names that relate to what you're trying to do. Yes, those are the major ones I will talk about for now. So we can now proceed to talk about data types. So if I'll just again refer, maybe someone is trying to move to JavaScript and they have worked with another language such as maybe Python, C, C++, Ruby, any other. You have maybe come across data types. So when we say variable, the variable is just like a general term to define memory location for data. But now the data types define, are we trying to store a number? Are we trying to store a string? Are we trying to store a float? That's a decimal. So the major data types here, we call them primitive data types and also non-primitive data types. So the primitive data types are the like inbuilt. We can say something like a number. In this case, we'll use the integer. We call them integers. We have strings. Those are the major ones. Those are the major primitive, and the floats too are among the primitive data types. So we have others such as, now there for the non-primitive, we can talk of arrays. We can talk of something like objects. Yeah, let me talk about these two ones for now. I will add more resources in the description part to guide you to where you can get more information. So an integer is basically a number. So for example, the one I said here, radius, this is a number. So that's an integer, a whole number. A float, and then integers, we mostly use the natural number 0 to 9, but even maybe something like 100, that's still an integer because it's a whole number. So floats, on the other hand, are decimals. So if I like 3.142, this one is a float. So strings are like, it's textual data, like this name, this is a string. So for JavaScript, you don't explicitly say what type of data type you're going to be storing, but then once you define it, like your computer already knows this is a string, this is an integer, yeah, like that. So we can talk about arrays and objects, then take maybe a few minutes. You take a break. And then, so for arrays, they are a collection of values. So in some cases, you will want to store more than one names. So we can say var names. Then you can have some names here. And you can have, that's a collection of data. That's a collection of JavaScript array. So I can have them like that. And another thing you've noted, maybe if you're coming from something like Python, you'll notice in JavaScript you're still using these semicolons. They're important when completing a statement. So for var names, we have our collection. So I can try to output. And see, we already have the names in our array. So there are different operations on an array. I'm going to handle a few for now. So names, maybe I could say log names. You can see I'm getting one name here. So this means it has gone to index number 1 and given me an output. So there are other common methods for JavaScript arrays like the pop method. We have the push method. We have the shift. We have the unshift. I'm just talking of a few, and then you can go and find out what they do. But I can talk maybe pop. It removes the last element from an array. So for example, if I say names dot pop, we could run that and see what it gives us. So it has removed the last name from our array. So if I come here and remove this statement, the output in one, and bring it here, we will notice we are now getting an array with only 3 elements. The last element has been removed because we applied the pop method. So the push method is used to add an element to the end of an array. So we can maybe in another time we can talk about the other method, but for now I just wanted us to know what are the major data types. So an object is used to store key value pairs. In other languages you might come across them in using other terms, but basically this is the structure of an object in JavaScript. So oh, comment. We are having this object, maybe it has a name. Sorry, the age should be an integer. So we have something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and see if we can print our object. It's object one. Yeah, you can see our object is right here with the name and the age. So we can, let's see if we can access, this is the key and this is the value. This can be equated to what we call the dictionary in Python and perhaps a hash in Ruby. So I'm just stating this in case someone has worked with another language and they are trying to understand the same concepts. The other part we'll handle today is about writing functions in JavaScript. So a function is a block of code that performs a specified task. This is the format of writing functions in JavaScript. We will also check on how to write the arrow functions. So inside this parentheses, you can accept parameters. Yes. So for today, let's start with this first function that will return some greeting here. Then to invoke a function, you must call it. So that's it. Let's then try it this way. That's how we invoke a function. Should now see a greeting. Okay, it's actually printing the function. Let's try something different just for a moment. That's it. We can now have a greeting right there. Then that's it. So let me now do the arrow function. So this is how we define an arrow function. It works pretty much the same way. You can note that we did not use the function keyword. But to avoid some conflict, we could do that. We have an error here. Yes, so we are trying to access this function before initializing it. Okay, this part should also go inside the this time why not. Okay, you can see we have hello world, but to do it in a better way, and just do it that way. Yes, we can now see our output right here. So I'll just go straight ahead and talk a bit about conditionals in JavaScript. So conditional, sometimes you might want to execute code only when a certain condition is met, or wait until a condition is met before you execute the code. In this case, we are going to talk about the else, if and else conditional. So we'll just write some sample code. Let's say I have a variable age, and then I want to be able to allow someone into a party when they're above the age of 18. So this is how I'm going to go about it. So when the person is above the age of 18, we should be able to display that output right there. Yes, we made a mistake. Let's remove that piece of code. Let me just use this piece of code right here to explain it. You can see because the age is above 21, we are getting the welcome to the party. So if we change this age to something, let's say 16, we'll be told to try out next time. So basically this is an if, else, if, and else conditional statement. The other conditional statements that you may come across is the case. We can try it out later on, maybe in a separate video, but for today you should just understand that conditionals help us to execute code only on certain conditions, like give a response based on the condition. In the final part of this video, we are going to talk about loops. So we have already seen that conditionals execute code based on a specific condition. But for the loops, they run continuously in a repeated manner until based on that given condition. For example, in this case, I have a for loop that is going to output a number based on as long as it's less than 5. So let's see how it's running. Let me comment out this other part of the code. So let's see what this part will give us. So you can see it's giving us 0 up to 5. So it's the for loop has 3 parts. The first part, this one, is the initialization. This one now is the condition, and this one is the operation. In this case, it's an increment. So every time after the condition has run, it increments again by 1, checks our condition until it becomes false. So now we get our output. The same code could be implemented using a while loop. So let's see how that works in a while loop. Right. You can see in this case we are getting 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what if we change this one to be a 0? Let's just try and see what our output will be. Yeah, you can see you're getting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this condition and the for loop are basically the same thing. So the other thing I would like to say is about the do while. You can go and check it out. This one runs until the condition becomes false. You can go and check the do while loop. It's also important to understand it in JavaScript. So basically, I think we are done with the main concept. This video was like a basic introduction to what JavaScript entails. I hope it will be helpful to you. You can check out for the next video where we'll dive more into DOM manipulation and now get to see our code working directly in the browser, our JavaScript programs directly working in the browser, invoking some events, working with some buttons to add data, things like those. We'll just now be building basically web applications using pure JavaScript. Thank you for watching. I hope you found the video valuable.